Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to take a massive foundational concept, the choreography of cell division, and break down the crucial facts and, the surprising mechanisms so you can walk away well-informed and slightly astonished.
Yeah, and we're diving into how life manages to perpetuate itself with just flawless genetic precision.
And precision is really the key word here, isn't it?
It absolutely is. The central challenge we're looking at is how does a single parent cell accurately duplicate and then distribute its entire genetic library into two daughter cells that are perfectly identical?
That sounds hard enough.
Well, think about this. The DNA in just one of your cells is about 2 meters long. That's like 6 feet. And it has to be copied and then split without a single error. The accuracy required is, it's just breathtaking.
6 feet of microscopic string, perfectly managed. Okay, so let's unpack this with some key terms we're going to need. The cell's entire library of genetic info is its genome.
Right. And those DNA molecules, they're not just floating around, they're wrapped tightly with proteins. And these structures, we call them chromosomes.
Chromosomes, I remember they were named just because they absorb dye, right? Color body.
Exactly. And the whole complex, the DNA plus all those proteins, whether it's condensed or unwound, that's called chromatin.
Okay, so before we get into the mechanics, why does a cell even go through all this trouble?
Well, the rules are huge. For a single-celled organism, like an amoeba, it's just reproduction. Simple as that.
One cell becomes two.
Yep. For us, it's about growth and development, going from a single fertilized egg to a whole person. And maybe most importantly for our daily lives, it's about renewal and repair.
Ah, like replacing skin cells or blood cells.
Constantly, you're replacing billions of cells every day. That process has to be continuous, and it has to be error-free to keep your tissues healthy.
All right, let's look at how eukaryotes organize this monumental task. We have our main body cells, the somatic cells. They have two sets of chromosomes. In humans, that's 46.
And then you've got the reproductive cells, the gametes. So sperm and eggs. They have exactly half that number, just one set. 23 in humans.
And the process we're focusing on today is mitosis, which is all about conserving that number. You start with 46, you end with two cells that each have 46.
Precisely. And to do that, every single chromosome has to be copied before division begins. And this is where the structure gets really crucial.
Okay, so you have a duplicated chromosome. What does that look like?
It consists of two identical parts, and these are called sister chromatids. They are held together all along their length by these protein complexes called cohesins.
Like a kind of molecular glue.
Yeah, exactly. And they're held tightest at that pinched-in region, the centromere. So you have what we still call one chromosome, but it actually has two identical DNA molecules joined at the hip.
This is a point that trips a lot of people up. So let's just pause on the accounting here. The cell gets ready to divide. It has 46 duplicated chromosomes, each with two sister chromatids.
Correct.
What happens the very instant they separate?
That's the critical switch. We define a chromosome by its centromere. As long as those two sisters are stuck together by that single centromere, they count as one chromosome. The second those cohesin proteins are cut and they fly apart, each one is now considered an independent, full-fledged chromosome.
So for a very brief moment before the cell actually splits in two, it technically has 92 chromosomes.
For a fleeting moment, yes. It's a temporary doubling that guarantees each new daughter cell gets exactly one complete set of 46 when the cytoplasm finally divides.
It's an elegant solution. And that's totally different from meiosis, which is the other kind of division that's designed to cut the chromosome number in half for the gametes.
A whole different story for another day.
Right. Okay, so now that we have the goal-perfect genetic identity, let's look at the timeline, the cell cycle.
The cell cycle is basically the entire life story of a cell, from the moment it's formed until it divides itself. And it alternates between two major phases.
Most of its life, like 90%, is spent in interphase.
Yeah.
That's the growth and prep period.
And then the last bit is the real drama. The mitotic M phase, which is mitosis, the nuclear division, plus cytokinesis, the cytoplasmic division.
Interphase itself is broken into 3 stages. And I love that our source material says the gaps aren't gaps at all. You start in G1, the first gap.
Right. The cell is just doing its job here. It's metabolically active. It's growing. Then it hits the S phase for synthesis.
And this is the point of no return.
Absolutely. This is where the DNA replication happens. Once a cell completes the S phase, it is committed. It is going to divide.
And after that is the G2 phase, the second gap, where it does its final checks, finishes growing, and gets everything ready for the big show.
Which brings us to the M phase with its 5 stages: prophase, prometaphase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase.
Let's talk about the choreography. How do you move these things around?
The cell builds this elaborate structure called the mitotic spindle. It's basically a scaffold made of microtubules and proteins.
And in animal cells, this whole thing starts building from the centrosome, right?
Exactly, the microtubule organizing center. It actually duplicates during interphase, and the two centrosomes move to opposite ends of the cell. They become the poles of the spindle.
And then in prometaphase, the nuclear envelope breaks down and the chaos begins.
Well, organized chaos. This is when specialized protein structures called kinetochores form on the centromere of each chromatid.
So each duplicated chromosome has two of them, facing opposite directions.
It does. Think of them like molecular grappling hooks. The spindle microtubules, we call them kinetochore microtubules, attach to these hooks and start pulling the chromosomes back and forth.
It's that molecular tug of war we talked about.
It is, until they all get lined up perfectly. And that perfect lineup defines metaphase. All the chromosomes are sitting right on the metaphase plate.
Which, just to be clear, is not a real thing.
Not at all. It's just an imaginary line, an equator, midway between the two poles. But it's critical that they're all there in a perfect standoff.
Because the next stage, anaphase, happens all at once.
It does. It's usually the shortest stage. It begins when an enzyme called separase just suddenly cleaves those cohesin proteins. It's like unlocking handcuffs simultaneously on all 46 chromosomes.
And then they get dragged to opposite poles. So how do they actually move? Are they reeled in?
It's a mix, but the main driver is amazing. Motor proteins on the kinetochore literally walk the chromosome along the microtubule track.
So they're walking on the track.
Yes. And as they walk, the microtubule itself shortens by losing subunits at that end. It's called depolymerization. People call it the Pac-Man mechanism.
The kinetochore is eating the track as it goes. That's incredible.
It really is. And at the same time, the whole cell is getting longer. Other microtubules, the non-kinetochore ones, overlap in the middle and use motor proteins to push against each other, stretching the cell out.
Creating space for the two new cells.
Right. And once the two complete sets of chromosomes arrive at opposite ends, we hit telophase. The nuclear envelopes reform, chromosomes decondense, and mitosis is officially over.
But the cell isn't two cells yet. That's cytokinesis.
Correct. And this is where animals and plants really part ways. Animal cells do it by cleavage. A groove forms, the cleavage furrow.
And what's making it pinch?
A contractile ring of actin and myosin filaments just under the membrane. It works like a drawstring. It just cinches closed until you got two separate cells.
But plant cells have that rigid cell wall. They can't just pinch.
No, they can't. They have to build a new wall from the inside out. Vesicles from the Golgi apparatus line up in the middle and fuse together to form something called the cell plate.
And that plate just keeps growing outwards.
It grows and grows until it fuses with the outer membrane and a new cell wall is deposited right there.
If you look at this whole complex process, it seems like,
Oh.
well, a lot,
Right.
but it probably evolved from something simpler, right?
Oh, certainly from binary fission in bacteria. It's much simpler. They have one circular chromosome, it replicates, and the two copies move apart as the cell elongates. They use proteins that are actually very similar to our actin and tubulin.
So the evidence suggests mitosis just added layers of complexity onto that ancient prokaryotic blueprint to handle, a much bigger genome with linear chromosomes.
Exactly. You can even see what look like intermediate steps in some single-celled eukaryotes today, which is just fascinating.
It really is. Okay, let's move to the last crucial idea, regulation. The mechanism is complex, but the timing is everything. A liver cell might wait years to divide. A skin cell divides constantly. What controls this?
The short answer is signaling molecules in the cytoplasm. Early experiments where they fused cells together proved this. If you fuse a cell in M phase with a cell in G1, that G1 nucleus immediately starts mitosis even though it hasn't replicated its DNA.
So the cytoplasm is full of go signals.
It is. And we now know those signals are part of a molecular clock. The key players are enzymes called cyclin-dependent kinases, or CDKs.
CDKs are always present, but they're not always active.
Right. They're inactive until they bind to their partner protein, a cyclin, and the concentration of these cyclins, as their name suggests, goes up and down in a cycle.
So the CDK is the engine, but the cyclin is the key that turns it on.
Perfect analogy. And the first one they found was MPF, M-phase promoting factor. Its activity shoots up during G2, and that's the signal that pushes the cell past the G2 checkpoint and into mitosis.
And it triggers mitosis by, phosphorylating things?
By phosphorylating a ton of proteins, yeah. Including ones that make the nuclear envelope break down. But here's the beautiful part.
Okay.
At the peak of its power during anaphase, MPF actually triggers the destruction of its own cyclin.
So it self-destructs.
It does. The cycle level plummets, the CD key becomes inactive, and the cell is forced to exit mitosis. That rise and fall of cyclin is the cell cycle clock.
And this clock has safety measures, these checkpoints.
Yes, critical stop-and-go points. The
Yeah.
G1 checkpoint is probably the most important one. If a cell gets the go-ahead signal here, it will usually complete the whole cycle.
And if it doesn't get the signal?
It exits the cycle and enters a non-dividing state called the G0 phase. Most of your specialized cells, like neurons or muscle cells, are in G0. They're just doing their job, not looking to divide.
There's also a key checkpoint during mitosis itself, right?
The M checkpoint, yes. It's an internal safety lock. Anaphase will not begin until the cell gets a signal that all kinetochores are properly attached to the spindle.
So no chromosome gets left behind.
Exactly. It prevents the separase enzyme from activating until every last chromosome is in place and ready to go.
And the clock also listens to signals from outside the cell.
Oh, absolutely. Things like growth factors. These are proteins released by other cells that tell a cell to divide, like PDGF, platelet-derived growth factor, which platelets release at a wound site to get fibroblasts to start dividing and heal the cut.
There are also physical signals, like density-dependent inhibition.
Right. Normal cells stop dividing when they get too crowded. They touch each other and the surface proteins send a stop signal. And they also need anchorage dependence.
Meaning they have to be stuck to something to divide?
Most of them do, yeah, like the extracellular matrix.
Which brings us, finally, to cancer. Because cancer cells are basically cells that have lost all respect for this entire control system.
Completely. They just ignore all the signals. They ignore density dependence. They ignore anchorage dependence. They'll just pile up on top of each other in clumps.
They might even make their own growth factors.
Or have a faulty signaling pathway that's stuck in the on position. They just blow right through the checkpoints. They achieve a kind of immortality, like the HeLa cells, which have been dividing in labs since 1951.
And when these cells form a mass, that's a tumor. If it stays put, it's benign.
But if the cells acquire more changes that let them invade other tissues and spread, it becomes a malignant tumor. And that spread through the blood or lymph is what we call metastasis.
And many of our cancer treatments are designed to specifically target this out-of-control cell cycle.
Exactly. Chemotherapy drugs like Taxol, for example, mess with the mitotic spindle. It prevents the microtubules from breaking down, so the cancer cells get stuck in metaphase and can't divide.
So, to recap our whole dive here, life's continuity depends on this unbelievable genetic accuracy in copying and splitting DNA.
Which is carried out by the precise physical choreography of the mitotic spindle.
And that whole process is governed by a sensitive molecular clock made of cyclins and CDKs, which has to answer to these critical checkpoints.
It is a phenomenal achievement of molecular engineering. Every minute of every day, billions of your cells are performing this dance perfectly.
And that leads to a final thought for you to consider. We saw how the cell cycle is halted by these stop signals at checkpoints, yet cancer cells somehow bypass these critical controls. If the original problem is often just a single genetic change, a tweak to one protein, how profound must the resulting chaos be to allow malignant cells to not only grow forever, but to actively metastasize and evade our own immune system? What subtle molecular shift allows a cell to become truly immortal? Thank you for diving deep with us today.